Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back here to The Full Story on WYAB 103.9 on this Wednesday. Already made it to halfway into the week. And again, it has been a busy week, as it always is. It seems like there is always a huge news story, and one that we've been anticipating at least for this week. We've been talking about it over the last couple of days, is President Trump's conversation with Vladimir Putin over the phone. Again, the first time a U.S. president has talked to Vladimir Putin since the Ukrainian war began. So we're going to discuss what was said in that meeting, what was agreed to in that meeting, because there were some agreements, as well as what the Ukrainian response has been, what Zelensky has said about that call and what was said. Again, not that he has much say in it, because again, we pretty much fund his war, so he doesn't have much say in the matter, but it's interesting to get his take on it, as we will discuss and break down everything that goes with that. Again, pretty highly anticipated phone call that he has had with them. Additionally, I want to talk about changes to Social Security. So this has been wildly hard to get any kind of truth in this one, because there's been a lot of talk about Donald Trump trying to hurt Social Security recipients, trying to take away money from Social Security recipients. We're going to break down what those changes are, as they've brought in more, or potentially more, requirements for people receiving Social Security. Things like actual identity checks, pushes that, according to the Trump administration, are there to ensure that, or to cut down on fraud, waste, and abuse of the Social Security system. Of course, you heard during his statement to Congress, his speech to Congress, about people 150 years old getting Social Security benefits. So they've been trying to cut down on that. My thing is they should cut down on the government spending the money within Social Security as well. Hopefully that's also being done, as well as catching the people who are illegally using those funds. They should look at the government illegally using those funds. So I hope they're cutting down on that as well. And then also, if we have time, I want to talk about files of the JFK assassination have officially been released. So more than 63,000 pages, actually, of records related to the 1963 assassination of JFK, many without redactions that have been there for a long time. They've finally releasing a lot of it. Of course, RFK Jr. being part of Donald Trump's cabinet. Another promise that he made during the campaign. He said he's going to release it. He said that during the campaign, so it's no surprise that he is coming through for that as well. So we're going to talk about that. If there's any major discoveries yet, like I said, 60,000 pages was just released. So it was just released last night. So there are going to be people scouring those pages piece by piece, word by word, period by period, comma by comma, as they go through and try to find out what is all in there. If what we know about the grassy knoll, all of those fun things that have been, not fun things, interesting things. Fun things was not the right word for that at all. Interesting things that have been talked about in regards to the Kennedy assassination since it's happened, since 1963, which is, 60 some odd years ago now, 62 years ago. Crazy how long ago that was, right? Not that I was here during that time, but it's just crazy to think that that was more than half a century. Think about how much changed since 1963, in a lot of ways, and how much of a different country we are from 1963, both good and bad. How much changes have happened in that time? Crazy stuff. That's really even before the Vietnam War. It's kind of crazy how our military has changes. But those records are released. We're going to talk about that. What all has been released, what is going to be released, and like I said, what information people may or may not be able to find out through that new release. As always, we'll end up with This Day in History at the end of the show. We are running live on Rumble and YouTube, if you want to leave comments or anything there as well. But if you want to call in, the number is 601-879-0002. You can call in here to the studio. We can talk during the breaks. Like I said, during the breaks, those we can talk a little bit more freely, and we can have that on the live stream if you want to be on there when you talk on the phone. So again, full show up ahead. A lot of stuff to get to. So we're going to go ahead and take our first break right here. Again, number 601-879-0002. But keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9 as we get to our first story of the day, and that is the anticipated phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. Vladimir Putin. They're both with Vladimir, even though Vladimir Zelensky spells it differently. He spells it the Ukrainian way with Y's. But he spoke with Vladimir Putin for at least 90 minutes yesterday about ending the war in Ukraine, noting that the two leaders agreed that negotiations will begin immediately in the Middle East. So again, they've been meeting each other in Saudi Arabia for the last, back and forth the last month, with Marco Rubio going down there, meeting envoys with both Ukraine and Russia, with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky also being in Saudi Arabia as well. The two leaders agreed to a ceasefire against energy infrastructure, and what Trump described as a call as very good and productive on Truth Social. He said many elements of a contract for peace were discussed, including the fact that thousands of soldiers are being killed, and both President Putin and President Zelensky would like to see it end. That process is now in full force and effect, and we will, hopefully, for the sake of humanity, get the job done, with an exclamation point. Again, that was on social, Truth Social. So the call began at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, according to White House spokesperson Stan Scavino. The White House then said around 12:52 p.m. the call was over. That would not say initially which side hung up first. I don't know why that's important, but they decided to put that in there as a fact. The White House said in a statement after the call, quote, "Today, President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with a lasting peace. They also stressed the need for improved bilateral relations between the United States and Russia. The blood and treasure that both Ukraine and Russia have been spending in this war would be better spent on the needs of their people." And went on to say the conflict should never have started and should have been ended long ago with sincere and good faith peace efforts. The leaders agreed that the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementing of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire, and permanent peace. These negotiations will begin immediately in the Middle East. They said that the leaders spoke broadly about the Middle East as a region of potential cooperation to prevent future conflicts. They further discussed the need to stop proliferation of strategic weapons and will engage with others to ensure the broadest possible application. The two leaders shared the view that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel. And the two leaders agreed, that's actually kind of interesting that they would talk about Israel during this. The two leaders agreed that a future with an improved bilateral relationship between the United States and Russia has a huge upside. This includes enormous economic deals and geopolitical stability when peace has been achieved. So let's take that. Let's kind of break that down a little bit. So of course, the biggest part of that is the cessation of a ceasefire against energy infrastructure in Ukraine, and as I talked about earlier this week, that has been the key target for Russia pretty much through most of its campaign, outside of taking actual land itself. The huge target for them has been the energy infrastructure. So essentially wanting to black out Ukraine, not giving them the ability to turn on their lights and run their country is a pretty big target. As well in things like winter, trying to freeze them out, things like that is it's a very effective strategy. And so that's why that's the big thing, for the immediate ceasefire, because that will essentially allow Ukraine to start rebuilding. Again, it takes away their biggest target. So during the call, the other thing about that, again, this interesting thing that they share the view that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel. So that's interesting because Iran and Russia have been working together. Whether they're allies or not, I don't know. I think they're just mutually beneficial to each other more than they are necessarily allies. But that's very interesting that Trump is getting some kind of security guarantee for Israel as well, because we know that, and then this is how Trump, the Trump administration plays chess, right? In that we know that that Hamas, for instance, and Houthis and other places, they're all backed by Iran. Hezbollah as well, up in Lebanon, which they had to have those strikes up in Lebanon earlier this year. Um, all of these things, a lot of those groups are funded by Iran. And so by them coming to an agreement that Iran should not play a part in Israeli conflicts, well, that's a pretty big statement. Because I don't know if they're looking for Russia to put on pressure on Iran, because obviously, again, they're mutually beneficial to each other, or at least they have been, to ensure to kind of freeze off Hamas, right? Which, of course, with the strikes in Gaza starting over, again, maybe all that has to play with each other, right? Because the strikes in Gaza just started this week, right before the phone call with Vladimir Putin. And in that phone call to Putin, they talk about Iranian influence, or Iranians taking part in the conflicts in Israel. And so I don't know, like it seems the timing of all that seems very interesting, right? And that this is a larger plan of how they're intertwining these two conflicts, right, in a way to figure out both of them, and figure out both of them from a strategic global perspective, right? Instead of just, again, being spoiled children and setting their heels in the ground like the last administration is, they're moving pieces around the board. They're moving a lot of pieces around the board to try to get the best positions possible. So also that second part of that statement that I just talked about is improved bilateral relationships between the United States and Russia. And this is something I've always said makes sense. Is like, I get it, right? Russia's a bad country. Vladimir Putin is a dictator. Get it, understand it, cool, right? I agree with that. The thing is that I don't care, right? I don't care if Vladimir Putin's a dictator to his people, or if he's bad to his people. Like, then they should do something about it. If they can't do something about it, I mean, that's just their country. Again, it's not my job to run their country for them. They've had revolutions there before, I think, right? Pretty famous revolutions. So that's on them. But that doesn't mean, if it's beneficial to the United States to work with someone, why would we not? Right? Why would we not work with Russia if it can mean better stability for the region? And of course, it would mean better if we're working with Russia, right? Or at least have understandings with Russia, not necessarily work with them. When I say work with them, I don't mean like sharing of assets, right? I mean, we're not going to we're just not going to bat heads every single time. How is that not bad for the for the area, right? Because that does bring peace. That doesn't mean we look the other way when Russia does things in Europe or something, right? Or not put sanctions on them, but at the same time, it's like, hey, if we're not batting heads, if we can prevent those things, right? Instead of always saying, oh, you're a bad person, you're horrible, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to talk to you, we're not going to recognize you, all of that stuff. How does that bring peace? It doesn't, right? All that does is escalate tensions. Whereas, hey, it's like we're going to have this improved relationship, and that's how you can stop a lot of this stuff, right? Again, you wonder why Russia didn't do anything when Trump was in the presidency the first time, right? Invades Crimea during Obama, 4 years of Trump, nothing, and then all of a sudden Biden gets in there, invades eastern Ukraine, right? I mean, it's why did he not do it during Trump's administration, right? Maybe it's because we can. Maybe because he's able to work with them, right? As you know, as the old saying goes, right? Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. It's a great example. You know, no reason to always combat heads with someone when that's just not good for the region. It doesn't bring peace. It just makes things worse. Now, what it does do is keep this perpetual state of conflict, which is good for the military-industrial complex, right? All the money that they get from perpetual conflict. That's what they want. And of course, we've known all the backroom deals that the Biden family's had in Ukraine as well. So all of that stuff comes together. That makes sense. Why they are doing what they're doing, but it wasn't in the best interest of Americans, and it wasn't in the best interest of Europe, and it definitely it was in the best interest of the Bidens. So what Trump is saying is like, look, again, I get it, bad people, but doesn't mean we can't have agreements with them to bring lasting peace to the region. So during the call, Putin said a complete cessation of military aid to Ukraine was a key condition for ending the war. According to Russia's state-run TASS news agency, citing the Kremlin, which again that makes sense too. Is we have to stop funding their war, and again we can do that as long as we have our mineral rights deal in Ukraine, which again, we don't need to spend the money there. The fact that we own the mineral rights to the place should in and of itself be enough protection right there. Because again, it would start a war if they tried to take over our property. Now again, if we have a mutual understanding between them, conflicts like that are avoided, right? Because we talk to each other. It's not. Hey, we're not going to answer the phone if you call again, like a teenage girl who's mad at her boyfriend, right? That's not what we're doing. We're being adults in the room, and we are being able to talk to each other and figure out disagreements or even misunderstandings. And misunderstandings can quickly escalate to something much, much more deadly. So Putin backed the idea from Trump of a mutual 30-day pause on strikes on energy infrastructure and gave that command to his military, according to the TSS. Again, TASS, to TASS, that state-run news agency. It also reported that Russia will return 23 seriously wounded Ukrainian soldiers to Kyiv as a gesture of goodwill. Trump said last night that, quote, many elements of a final agreement to end the Ukraine war have been agreed to, but much remains. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said Monday that, quote, the ball is now in Russia's court to accept a U.S. proposed ceasefire deal that Ukraine agreed to last week. The U.S.-backed proposal, which includes an immediate 30-day ceasefire and guaranteed resumption of U.S. military aid and intelligence to Ukraine, was finalized during diplomatic talks in Saudi Arabia last week. And so, again, talking to Ukraine, getting these things moving, and I can understand Russia's position, right? They don't want an expansion of NATO. They don't want the United States funding Ukraine's military, which, I'm all for. I think American taxpayers are in agreement with that as well. However, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said that a vow by Vladimir Putin not to attack energy infrastructure was, quote, very much at odds with reality, following an overnight barrage of drone strikes across the country. Zelensky said that he would speak with U.S. President Donald Trump later in the day and expect to hear more about the American leader's phone call with Putin about a ceasefire, discuss the next steps to be taken. Zelensky said, even last night, after Putin's conversation with Trump, when Putin said he was allegedly giving orders to stop strikes in Ukrainian energy, there were 150 drone strikes last night, including on energy facilities, according to Zelensky. Then again, he has no proof of it. And he never has done any proof of anything. And again, when that happened, the timing of it, you can't trust anything. The amount of propaganda that is in Ukraine is absolutely ridiculous. I don't believe anything that comes from it unless I see the actual video or the actual pictures. And even then, you got to watch out because pictures and video can also be skewed. Like, we never really know what's going on over there. And I've said that several times because it's always, we're doing great. Oh, man, we're about to be invaded. We're doing great. Oh, man, it's about to lose everything. It's like, it's just such a ping pong effect of what's going on in Ukraine from the news we get there, right? There is never a any kind of medium, right? On there, it's always straight despair and about to be completely invaded. To hey, we're doing drone strikes in Moscow. Like what? I mean, I guess the two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. They don't make very much sense militarily, but or they're invading Russia. It's like, well, why are you invading Russia with ground troops when you're saying they're outside the door of Kiev? Like it doesn't make any sense to me. So again, I guess technically those aren't mutually exclusive. You could be invading the country while they're at your capital. Doesn't seem like the best use of people. But it's again the amount of information we get out of there. Like I said, either from Russia or Ukraine, you can't trust any of it. And again, they haven't really allowed American media in there to try to see what's going on. And then you have the case of, well, even American media was allowed, would they honestly report it? There's just problem after problem after problem in that regard. So again, and we don't know when Putin gave the order or when that actually stopped. So we'll see. We'll see what that happens. All that stuff that goes on between that. Um, so so like I said, so there's no indication that Putin backed away from his conditions for a prospective peace deal, which was fiercely opposed by Kyiv. Zelensky said that one of the most difficult issues in future negotiations would be the issue of territorial concessions. He said, "For us, the red line is a recognition of the Ukrainian temporarily occupied territories as Russian." He said, "We will not go for it." Again, you don't have much decision in that. And again, they have to understand what Ukraine has to understand is like any war, you can't win, right? Not like any war. He's not in a position where Ukraine can defeat Russia. It's just not there, right? They don't have the people, they don't have the money, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have anything that's enough, right? Like I said, Nazi Germany couldn't do it. So that to put that in perspective, right? Um, so uh, there's going to have to be concessions. There's going to have to be. If you're going to have peace, that's just the way it is, right? You're not in a position to say, we will not go for it. Well, you're just not in a position to say that, right? And again, all we have to say is, look, Zelensky, you're going to accept this deal. And if you don't, then we're going to pull all of our funding from you. And if we do that, then it's only a matter of time before Russia does completely take Kyiv. So um, while you have something to gain, right, you still have some kind of negotiation power, and the only negotiation power you have is the one that we give you because we're funding your war, right? 40% of it, almost half of it, we are funding. And as I said before, the rest of Europe cannot cannot make up for that because they don't even have enough money for their own militaries, much less yours. So he doesn't have much of a position to say things like that. And Russia is going to want recognition of some of those territory. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that's one of the reasons they've done all this. Right? We talked about we went into the history of this war at quite a lot of detail a couple weeks ago. How this has been going on for years, but it is all part of the it's all part of how this is going to play out, an understanding of positions. All right, we're going to go ahead and take our next break right here. When we get back, I want to talk about these changes to Social Security to try to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. If you want to call in during the break, number 601-879-0002. Keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the full story on WYAB 103.9. As you hear the bagpipes, the horrible, piercing bagpipes. But let's get to our next story, which has always been a horrible experience, and that's the Social Security Administration. So more changes to the Social Security Administration are trying to make it to try to cut out waste, fraud, and abuse. So the Social Security Administration will add new procedures requiring beneficiaries to prove their identity before claiming benefits or changing their direct deposit instructions as part of an effort to crack down on fraud. The changes, which will go into effect next month, come as Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency seeks to root out waste and fraud across federal agencies. President Donald Trump has repeatedly cited statistics that there are millions of Social Security recipients more than 100 years old, suggesting rampant fraud in the pension system. Leland Dudek, the agency's acting commissioner, said on Tuesday evening with a call to reporters that, quote, the Social Security Administration is losing over $100 million a year in direct deposit fraud. Social Security can better protect Americans while expediting service. He said a problem with eliminating fraudulent claims is that, quote, the information that we use through knowledge-based authentication is already in the public domain, and that this is a common sense measure. So beneficiaries can either register for a My Social Security account online or visit a Social Security office. Claims traditionally made by telephone, long a significant source of benefits fraud, will have to be completed online or in person, which again makes a lot of sense. So you can no longer try to fake things over the phone, or if you do it online, there has to be two-factor authentication, however they do that, right? And there's multiple different ways you can do two-factor authentication where things are just a whole lot harder to commit fraud than just calling in and saying you are who you say you are. So the changes to 100% identity verification will have advantages, according to the Social Security Administration. Once enrolled, beneficiaries will be able to have funds deposited in one business day, down from the previous 30 days. Going back to Leland Dudek, he said, for far too long, the agency has used antiquated methods of proving identity. Social Security can better protect Americans while expediting service. So that's what I just talked about. And so again, also, I was going to say, hey, if you're 150 years old, you have to come to the Social Security office if you want to change your bank information, right? To one that you've been using for 30 years, and all of a sudden you need a brand new one out of nowhere because how many 150-year-olds just decide to change banks randomly? Then you're going to have to come and do it in person or do it over two-factor authentication online to prove your identity. So again, makes a whole lot of sense, right? Because that's who it's going to apply to. They apply to new Social Security applicants and existing recipients who want to change their direct deposit information. So it doesn't affect everybody. It's only going to affect if you're going to change that direct deposit information or you're a new beneficiary. Again, that also makes sense because, again, someone who is, let's just say they're 90 years old, right? And they've had the same bank while using Social Security for the last 40 years. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they change banks. That seems weird, right? Not saying 90-year-olds don't just change banks, right? Because they can. And if they do, they can prove their identity. But typically what we're seeing in that is that they died. Someone's still getting the checks. They want the check to go to their bank account, not the dead person's bank account, right? That's what we've typically been seeing. And this is, again, just a common, like he said, that's just a common sense measure. Why would we not want to confirm your identity when we're talking about where to send checks? This just makes all kind of sense. Also, to make sure, I think it also protects against any kind of abuse against seniors, where someone can be forceful to them to make sure that their Social Security check is going to a person, right? They actually have to show up to the Social Security office or do this two-factor authentication. Now, not everything's perfect, right? But I think it helps, like I said, in that way too, right? So in multiple different ways, can it help? So this is coming, like I said, after a lot of changes in Social Security Administration, as DOGE has cut their workforce Um, and they plan to shutter dozens of Social Security offices, according to the leases that they said they will cut out. And so again, it's the same thing with all these federal agencies. Everybody's like, oh, they're cutting all these jobs for the federal agencies. Service is going to get lower. Well, that's the point. Is that it's probably not, because you have a gluttony of employees, right? You have 5 people doing the job that one person should do, right? And what we see is that those 5 people, they're not doing it any better than that one person would do. In fact, they're doing it worse. They are, they have red tape on top of red tape. 5 people have to talk about getting one certain thing done. It makes things more complicated. So by reducing the number of people, actually it could increase. It can increase efficiency. Time will tell, right? That's part of what again. That is an Elon Musk classic. That's what he did. That's what he did with X, right? He just fired like 75% of the people that were there, and nothing changed, right? Which that shows that they had a gluttony of employees. That's the same. That's definitely the case for a lot of parts of the federal government. Is that we do not need as many people as we have in there, right? And then half those people don't show up to work, right? That's the kind of thing they're talking about. So they try to spin it always as, oh, he's firing all these people, it's going to hurt you. Well, like, we'll see, I guess, right? But the whole idea is that, well, no, it's not. It's just we're going to be saving money, but it's not just about saving money. It's about making things more efficient, because that's to the end of that, right? Department of Governmental Efficiency. That's kind of part of what they're doing. But they always try to throw that out there. Now, it may be the case that they cut too much on certain departments. I guess they will find that out, won't they? As they do a reevaluation. And that's when they said, okay, we need to bring people back in this department, or we can cut further this other department, right? So that's all. That all makes sense. Despite the fact they always want to say, "Oh, like he's firing all the people from the national. We're going to shut down our national parks." No, we're not. We just didn't need 5 rangers to do the job of one, right? You need 4 people in the visitors area, right? Like, let's think about what we're doing here, right? Again, it's all about common sense. It's nothing about cutting services or making things worse. It's just about making things as efficient as possible. Okay, we have a little bit of time here. So one thing I want to talk about is the price of the price of eggs. You mentioned it there. Obviously, been a big point of contention for a lot of people. So the wholesale egg prices have completely plunged, according to analysts, including they've fallen more than 40% since the end of February. So the wholesale prices dropped to $4.83 per dozen, where they were at a peak of $8.58 per dozen on February 28th. Which that's according to Expana, who tracks agricultural commodity prices. So the pullback comes amid a reprieve from major bird flu outbreaks so far in March and weaker consumer demand. So that's what I want to talk about. I honestly don't much believe about the whole bird flu thing. I really don't. I'm very skeptical about that, because again, as I go to other places, and if I go to local towns that are using local eggs, obviously their prices haven't gone up. But it's really that second one is weaker consumer demand. They tried to increase the price of eggs as much as they could. And like anything, like basic economics, right? Economics 101 is everything, every product has a bell curve of prices, right? Of where people will buy it. And they went way to the extreme to the right. And people were just like, you know what? Guess I don't need eggs. We'll skip out on the eggs. Eggs are a luxury, not doing it. And that's exactly what happened, which caused the weaker consumer demand. And I think the bird flu thing was like, sure, I'm not saying there wasn't a bird flu, but for a bird flu to affect all egg prices around the country, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like I said, especially when you see in places where that haven't happened. So again, they were, it is, these prices on eggs have went up to $5.90 for a dozen large grade A eggs on average in February, which is a record high, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And people just found out they're just not going to pay it. They're just not going to do it, and that's how economics works. And hopefully the prices, they're saying the prices may not go down immediately because they want to sell their stock of the higher priced eggs. But again, if one grocery store does it, if one grocery store all of a sudden puts their eggs at $2.50 a dozen again, then everybody's going to flock to that. It's going to cause all the other grocery stores to do it, which I think is really what's going to happen. You're going to have one grocery store is like, you know what? We're going to take advantage of this time. Let's bring everybody back in. We're going to have cheap eggs, sell all the eggs, and hopefully sell some high-priced milk and everything else along with it. So that's probably how it's going to work. So prices should go down pretty significantly. Again, unless you just have one grocery store in your town, that's the only one that's going to do it. But like I said, a lot of those grocery stores buy their eggs locally, so they don't have to. They didn't have to worry about it anyway. But I just find it funny as they say, "Oh, they said the bird out flu's break, also consumer demand." It's really the second one, and that shows you how powerful consumer demand is, right? And everything is not everything is not nothing. I should say is immune to demand, right? You can actually have eggs so expensive that people no longer want to buy them, right? People things that people once thought as staple as eggs, they can say, you know what? If eggs is a luxury, we're not going to do it. And that's exactly what happened. I just find that interesting. That was mentioned at the bottom of the hour. Okay, last story that I want to get to, and that's real quick, is the JFK files, which have now been released. So, more than 63,000 pages of records relating to the 1963 assassination of President John F. Kennedy were released on yesterday, following an order by President Donald Trump. Many without the redactions that had confounded historians for years and helped fuel conspiracy theories. The U.S. National Archives and Records Administration posted to its website roughly 2,200 files containing the documents. That's right, it is online. The vast majority of the National Archives collection of over 6 million pages of records, photographs, motion pictures, sound recordings, and artifacts related to the assassination have been previously released. Larry Sabato, director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics and author of the Kennedy Half Century, said it will take time to review the records. He said, "We have a lot of work to do for a long time to come, and people just have to accept that." Like, why are you so aggressive, man? Like, calm down. I guess I know people are excited to try to get these new records, and of course, it's going to take time as people peruse through them. So Trump announced the release Monday while visiting the JFK Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., saying his administration would be releasing about 80,000 pages. He said, "We have a tremendous amount of paper. You've got a lot of reading," he said. Just a typical Trump way. Before Tuesday, researchers had estimated that the 3,000 to 3,500 files were still unreleased, either wholly or partially. And just last month, the FBI said it had discovered 2,400 new records related to the assassination. I don't know how they just discovered that. Just open up a file. Hey, look at this, guys. A JFK file. Who knew? But I just find that funny. The National Archives said on its website that in accordance with the president's directive, the release would encompass all records previously withheld for classification. Morley said that what was released Tuesday did not include a lot of the files and any of the recent discovered FBI files or 500 Internal Revenue Service files, IRS files. He said, nonetheless, this is the most positive news on the release of JFK files since the 1990s. So again, we'll see what comes of that. It's going to be interesting to see what people find out as time goes on. All right, we have to take our next break right here. We'll get back. We'll do This Day in History. We keep it to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9 as we get to this day in history. So on this day, March 19th, 1918, the United States Congress passed the Standard Time Act, which officially established daylight savings time across the country for the first time. The law was introduced as a wartime measure to conserve energy during World War I by shifting an hour of daylight from the morning to the evening, reducing the need for artificial lighting and fuel consumption. The idea of shifting the clocks forward had been proposed decades earlier, with Benjamin Franklin famously suggesting it in 1784 as a way to save candles. However, it wasn't until Germany and Austria implemented the daylight savings time in 1916 during World War I that other nations took the idea seriously. The U.S. followed suit in 1918, enacting nationwide standard time zones and daylight saving time through the Standard Time Act. However, daylight saving time was unpopular and was repealed in 1919 after the war ended, but returned during World War II when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt introduced wartime, keeping the country on year-round daylight saving time from 1942 to 1945. After the war, daylight saving time became a state-by-state decision, leading to a patchwork of time changes across the country. However, finally in 1966, Congress passed the Uniform Time Act, creating a nationally consistent system for daylight saving time. Those states could still opt out, and Arizona and Hawaii still do not recognize it. It makes sense in Hawaii because you're near the equator. You just don't really need daylight savings time. Then in 2005, the Energy Policy Act of 2005 extended DST in the United States to start on the second Sunday in March and end on the first Sunday in November. That is what happened today. Everybody lost 1 hour of sleep this time back in 1918. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. We'll see you again tomorrow. But until then, my name is Matthew Bishop. You've heard the full story.